Here.
No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
All right, welcome to episode 12. This is actually take 2, and I thank you, gents, for sticking with it. And Spectre actually showed up, so that is no longer unfortunate. So it's kind of like a whole redo, right? So we've got 2 top DD players represented here tonight with us. We got Zampy, mostly representing the Shimi, and we got Destroyer Taylor representing the Gearing, although he did drop a bomb on us, which he said he actually hates that ship, but he's a good DD player, and he's a gunboat advocate, so it'll still work for us. And Zampy, if you've used Warships.today at all, you will recognize instantly. And Destroyer Taylor, if you followed Supremacy League or you like US Destroyers, you're also going to recognize him, and they're both top tier players in World of Warships, and it's a pleasure to have you guys on, so welcome.
Thanks for having me back.
It's good to be here.
Should also mention that Destroyer Taylor actually also streams. He has a stream on Twitch. He goes under a different name.
Give us your plug.
It's Fleischwolf X. I can probably type it in for you.
Where'd that come from? Was that a previous game stuff that you streamed, or have you always just played World of Warships, or what's up?
I mean, I've had that gamer tag, Fleischwolf, or some variation of that since PlayStation 2, way back in the day, so over a decade. I've just been kind of holding on to it. I don't know. I guess I thought of it, and I don't really know if it... I know it means, like, meat grinder or something in German. It's like some sort of kitchen appliance, but I just thought it sounded cool. But yeah, with this, our organization, the Kantai, they have like the naming convention, so that's how Destroyer Taylor came about.
Is that like mandatory?
That is mandatory.
That name you have is awesome sounding. And like I would be very upset if someone maybe like let go of that name.
Yeah.
So did you originally have a World of Warships? And we've kind of derailed here, but what the heck, right? Did you originally have that name of World of Warships? So you rocking 2 accounts now, or did you pay the money to switch the name?
No. I guess I shelled out the money for the name change. Just I guess my couple of my buddies went over to the Kentai outfit, and there's a lot of good players in it. And
okay,
and I guess that was the biggest thing.
For reimbursement, but that's just me.
You make them pay your fee. All right. All right, so we derail. Let's get back to the topic that
moving on.
We've kind of promised some people we'd cover, and I've got some strong feelings about it. And we'll get into the Destroyer hate at the very end, but some of the key debate topics we're going to really talk about is whether or not the torpedo nerf was really a nerf for Shimis, and then kind of the IJN US Destroyer roles when it comes to an actual team victory, not just your own stats, and we'll get to that too. And that's kind of part of my hate, but just for context, we will, let's see, some of the numbers, and we kind of covered that before, but kind of decide that let's kind of skip past it because they can be kind of deceiving. But on average, there's a gap of about 1 torpedo hit, depending on how you want to parse it between the two. And it really comes down, and I think, Taylor, you talked about it a little bit, which was, kind of the style and what your target is when you're talking about what you're trying to do with that DD role. So let's start with you, Taylor, and if you could give us in general kind of what you think the role of destroyers are and warships.
Well, I mean, the main role is, especially with the shift away at higher tiers from standard battle to the domination, and now this Bastion game mode, where they're basically point controllers. They're the only ones that have the concealment good enough to cap these points without being blown away. You can't really expect a cruiser, which can be citadeled quite easily from a lot of these big gun Yamatos or other battleships, to be able to get onto a point and cap it. I see U.S. destroyers mostly. They are almost perfectly designed for base capping. They are just almost perfectly adapted for that one role. They have close quarter weapons, good concealment, the highest damage output of all the destroyers, as well as decently large, not the hardest hitting, but they have mostly 10 torpedo launchers at the higher tiers, which can put out a nice shotgun spread in a knife fight. As well as the longest lasting smoke, starting at tier 7, starts to last over 2 minutes for your allies as well. You can smoke your battleships and your cruisers before you roll in, and then they can support you while you cap, making them one of the most important, I think, destroyer types in the current game modes that are available.
How about you, Zampy? How do you see the general destroyer role from your perspective?
So, taking the opposite side of the aisle with the IGN destroyers, they're long-range torpedoes and their stealth but weak guns makes them more suitable for area denial and harassment of the capital ships. So battleships, maybe some sneak attacks on a carrier that's not really paying attention. They can't really go toe-to-toe or hold their own against the U.S. or the Russian destroyers. The guns aren't terrible, but it's definitely not something that I would rely on. They're good for the base capping. The Shima has a little bit of speed behind it. Again, it's not the quickest. It does have that concealment, but again, the gearing right there is keeping up with it. So toe-to-toe, I would still say the gearing has the upper hand against the Shima, especially given some of the recent changes to the torpedoes. But it is an excellent ship for just area denial, making sure to disrupt the enemy formation and keep those big battleships, the Yamatos and the Montanas, on their toes.
Well, so let's talk about the torpedo changes briefly before we kind of get into the debate of roles and how we get to wins instead of personal stats. At least that's where I'd like to take it. And so I kind of took a look at your stats from overall to post torpedo change, and what I noticed is they've actually gone up for your Shimi play. And so, and it's kind of intuition to me. I'm not a Shimi player, but I kind of always thought that the argument that, oh, the torpedo nerf has killed Shimikazes, and I always kind of thought that maybe that wasn't the case, that it changes how you do it slightly, but if you're a good Shimi player and doing it right, that it shouldn't have had that much of an effect on your total output or your contribution. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
It did change up the play style just slightly. The roll's still the same. The only difference is now you just have to be a little bit closer in order to hit your target. The main opponents that I've seen against the torpedo changes have been those players that like to sit in the back, launch the torpedoes a very safe distance, and just kind of watch them travel over the next minute or so until they reach their target that's been sailing in a straight line. I've always been more of an aggressive Shima player. I hardly ever drop torpedoes further than 10 kilometers out. And before the introduction of radar, I was frequently up on the edge of my concealment range at 6 kilometers, dropping torpedoes as close as I could without being seen. You have to be a little more conservative now because those radar-equipped ships will light you up, and they will put a hurt on you very quickly, and you can't really get away from it if you're within that 4 kilometers change between their max distance on the radar and your concealment. So you got to be a little more careful with that. But overall, I think it's made Shima play a little more dynamic, a little more fast-paced, given a little more risk-reward style, and just overall a bit more fun than it was just dropping torps off and not really doing anything until they're reloaded.
Well, okay, so let's talk about how you kind of have your ship set up, your module selection, your captain skills. And did you change your captain skills after the nerf? Did that have an impact on you? Well, let's not call it a nerf. Post torpedo change?
I did. The only thing that I changed, however, was I took torpedo acceleration off of my Shima captain. So I actually put it on vigilance instead because I don't really like getting hit by torpedoes, and the more warning I get, the better, just so I can dodge them myself. I personally run now the 12-kilometer torpedoes as opposed to the 8 or the 20-kilometer ones. I did give them a try just to mess around with it. The 8-kilometer torps are incredibly fun. It's like playing a Minikaze when you're facing Yamatos. But I found that you would have either a really good game where you're getting devastating strikes on the top battleships, or you're just not hitting anything at all because either there's something with radar around, or there's a carrier spotting you just can't get close enough.
All right. So what modules do you have it spec'd with?
So just going down the line, I have main armaments mod 1 just for reduced incapacitation. The second mod, I switch it up a bit. I actually go with main battery mod 2 for the increased turret rotation speed. Just because Shima's turrets turn so slowly, it can't keep up with the ship's rotation in a turn. And going with mod 2 helps to kind of counterbalance that a little bit, even if it does increase your reload time a little bit. But I actually picked up the basic firing training before they gave everybody situational awareness, just to keep that back in line with where the reload was. Third module is, of course, torpedo tubes mod 3. Got to get that reload time down on the torps. And then I go with propulsion mod 1, just so my engine doesn't get knocked out too frequently. Because with Last Stand, you can still turn with a rudder, but if you're trying to increase or decrease your speed when your engine's out, it's still not that reliable, not that responsive. And then for the fifth one, here I actually go for propulsion mod 2. With the Shima, the rudder shift time is quick enough that I don't feel another half a second quicker is going to make much of a difference. And there's a lot of smoke lying down, a lot of changing speed at the higher tiers, and it's much more beneficial to be able to pick up that initial speed than I feel it is to turn another half second quicker.
All right.
Sounds like you had this mod before they buffed the propulsion mod as well.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Okay, Taylor, if you could give us I think the
Yes.
only big change to the gearing was a module health turret buff. And if you could kind of give us your assessment on that change and tell us how you have your gearing and your gearing captain set up.
All right, so I guess starting with the gearing it's one of the ships that, I don't know if it's covered this, but the turret buff was a huge buff to the gearing. It used to be that it lost all kinds of turrets, especially those front two, and that in a knife fight, it really crippled the gearing, as it has only 6 guns, but 2 guns per turret. So losing a turret was you'd lose a third or more of your firepower. Throughout this week where we've had free respecs, I've been trying out multiple gearing builds just to experiment. One build that I kind of liked, but I thought was fun, but may not go with in the end personally, is the torpedo acceleration and full torpedo reload spec on the gearing. The gearing still has 16.5 kilometer torpedoes that I think go down to 13.8 or 13.3, something like that, with the torpedo acceleration. But they can go upwards of 71 knots with 1.4 detection, making them one of the longest range torpedoes that give the enemy the least amount of reaction time. So the gearing it's kind of, I think, where a lot of IGN destroyers players are upset is that the gearing might technically have the best sneak attack torpedoes in the game right now, especially after the detection changes to Japanese destroyers torpedoes.
Well, so when this free respec period is done, what are you gonna settle on finally?
Now, there is no perfect spec for Cookie Cutter. It's more like what do you want to do, right? With my gearing and Fletcher, as there is currently no hardcore super competitive Supremacy League for tier 10 ships, I was thinking of going with Demolition Expert. But if there was a competitive mode using the ship, I could easily see myself going with Survivability Expert. Now I have a level 18 captain, and I'm still deciding if I should get 2 tier 3 perks, most likely vigilance, or superintendent, or torpedo acceleration. All 3 of those are very attractive. Or dropping down to the 10% torpedo reload at tier 2. But at level 18, that would leave the spec kind of messy with a free floating point. Now that situational awareness is now given to everybody. Before the change, before situational awareness was given to everyone, I felt I had like the ultimate spec. I think I might end up going with. I still like vigilance for the same reason Zampy said. He doesn't like eating torpedoes as a destroyer because let's be real now, that could be instant death, and sometimes an extra second or 2 is all you need to do to position your ship or hit the brakes 1 second earlier, just to stop in time. So I'm thinking of keeping vigilance. So it really comes down to maybe keeping that 4th smoke, assuming you're using premium consumables, or torpedo acceleration, because 16.5 kilometer range is a little excessive versus 13.3, because you want to try to fire under 10 anyway. And having 1.4 kilometer torpedo or 1.4 detection torpedoes that go 71 knots is pretty amazing.
Okay, so let's get to the huge question number 1, which is, and we'll kind of add something to it. 1, I think we can agree. I think I heard Zampy basically say that the torpedo change it was not a nerf and doesn't really change or kill Shimikazes or make them less viable. Is that correct, Zampy?
That's my belief.
All right, from the expert. I don't think anyone could actually challenge that. If they do, I'm sure they can challenge you to a duel. We'd love to Twitch that. That'd be hilarious. But so in the current state, even if you went back and rolled it back to old Shimikaze, which I think at the time everyone loved and everyone wanted to play a Shimikaze, versus new buffed gearing, which one would you call better?
I would still go with the gearing. All things equal, pretty much in the rest of the statistics available on both ships, the only advantage the Shima has over the gearing is that extra quintuple torpedo launcher. And five more torpedoes in the water is really nice, especially when you can overlap the first 2. But it just doesn't stand up to the torpedoes and the guns that the gearing has.
Well, let's reframe it slightly. Not necessarily in a one-on-one situation, but let's put it in the context of your normal pug match, all things being equal to high tier. Which destroyer do you think really contributes more to a team's victory?
I would still say the same. Those extra 5 torpedoes just doesn't give the Shima that versatility that the gearing has.
How about you, Taylor?
I mean, the gearing, all USN destroyers seem to be the best at doing what the current game modes want us to do, which is now that there's a new focus on domination and this Bastion game mode at higher tiers, which is capping points. And the American destroyers, they have good concealment, have high damage output, and they have lots of torpedoes that they can send out, up to 10 at a time, which makes them really good at capping bases, which wins games.
Well, so pre-nerf, pre-buff for gearing, you would say Fletcher over Shimi?
I would say the Fletcher was better pre-nerf, pre-buff, pre-turret health buff. I think what we're referring to is because when the turrets were easily destroyed, the gearing almost without fail would lose at least 1 turret per game permanently, like on the first shell hit or so, and that would bring your gearing down to 4 guns. The Fletcher has 5. 12.9 gun range by default is much more agile, and technically some debate that it might have better torpedoes as they reload in much faster time and do more damage while still going 10.5 kilometers. And also, if a Fletcher loses a gun too, it's still the gearing and a Fletcher losing 1 turret have the same amount of guns.
So what do you guys chalk up the emotional reaction to the torpedo change to Shimis, and why there's such a revolt against it? Was it just simply because people don't like change? Or, I mean, if you look at how many people play Japanese destroyers versus US destroyers, I think most people probably prefer Japanese destroyers. I mean, somebody can correct me if I'm just way out in left field on that one, but I mean,
I
think it
depends,
was, yeah, it was just a matter of perception. I think the gearing takes a little more skill to play to still be able to survive, since it's typically seen as a gunboat. The Shimikaze was a bit easier when you could sit at range and stealth the entire time. And with the changed torpedoes, having to get a bit closer, have a little more risk and exposure, I don't think a lot of people wanted that kind of dynamic and close-in style of play as opposed to what they've been used to.
What were you gonna say, Spectre?
I was just gonna, remind everyone that, back before, they implemented that torpedo change, in high tier matches, it was not unusual for certain Shimikazes just to never ever be spotted if there was like a CV around. They would literally just spam torpedoes across the map, just on cooldown, with no fear of consequences, because you were 20 kilometers away, and no one could get close without getting shot up in the process.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because what you just described there is kind of what I still see majority of the time. And I think outside of getting a top tier player who is very aggressive, you still see that. You still even see that kind of mode in the average gearing player, I would argue, because their torpedoes are long enough for them to play, run laps around the battleship. And Taylor can weigh in on gearing play. With the long-range torpedoes, I think it lends people to play it safe instead of doing what it takes to contribute to the team victory for a destroyer, which is kind of out in front screening.
Yeah. So, for me, not much has changed. You still have the option to sit at long range and fire torps with impunity. They have a little bit more detection range and they're a little bit slower, so it's a little bit more easy to dodge them. But if you look at play of the better Shimikaze players before and after the nerf, you won't see much of a difference there, because they were already getting up and close with their torpedoes. And they still knew how to manage their ship, manage their surroundings, and be able to get out in a dangerous situation. Whereas some of the players who were a bit more comfortable just not being detected and launching torps at max range don't have that kind of ability to manage all of the variables that go into making a successful torpedo run up at a closer range. So they get caught a bit more, and then subsequently they get sunk a bit more, so they feel like their ship's not as effective.
How about you, Taylor?
I guess, we all remember before the Shimikaze torpedo changes, it was often described as torpedo soup, which was generally, I would say, bad for the game, just because the game isn't all about destroyers. It's all about all the ships. It's about battleships, cruisers, and the carriers. With the recent decline in carriers, Shimikazes could just go to town. And I guess the torpedo soup changes were really just trying to address that. But I've noticed with gearings lately, I don't know if people have been leveling gearings. Previous IGN destroyer players, I see a lot of. On my stream, I don't. This is probably inappropriate. I call them IGN destroyer refugees playing the gearings now. They're doing the same thing that they did with the old Shimikaze as they do with the new gearing now, just with one less quintuple launcher. Which
hang out by the battleships and not do their destroyer role.
Hang out
for
behind the battleships. Sometimes hitting them in the process, like the friendlies. Oh man, there's just some things that you see and you just kind of cringe. But lately I see going back to the gearing could, and this goes, I guess, applies to the kebab as well. 1 or 2 fires on a battleship, or 2 to 3 fires on a battleship, and a few gun hits it does pretty much more damage. I'm not really sure of the numbers, but I feel like 2 to 3 fires does more damage to a battleship than a flood. Especially if they can't put out those 3 fires. I've noticed the gearing is very good, especially with Demo Expert, at sitting at around. I think it can still fire at 9.7, and pretty much fire and do a lot. Guns just seem to be more consistent at dealing damage than torpedoes, because torpedoes to me feel like I mean, sure, there's skill at using torpedoes, but it also factors into the skill of your opponents on whether they're aware of your presence and if they're taking the appropriate measures, like maneuvering their ship.
Look at that, though. I mean, you still can't deny a nice 6 torpedo hit on an aware battleship.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, at least in your style of play, right? And I guess one of my frustrations with long range torpedo players, I would say IJM, but I've kind of noticed the same thing with Gearings as well, is that they're more interested in worrying about their own torpedo hits from the safety of, the meat shield than contributing to a victory. And I'm not sure why there isn't the equation between maybe you aren't a gunboat, but maybe you can spot better or at least see the torpedoes for the other ships that have trouble getting out of the way sooner, or contest a cap, even though you don't have to gun them down. You just have to have support to gun them down. Those kind of aspects of destroyer play that lately I've seen a lot of the just hide in the back. No change.
One thing I know that the IGN destroyers, just from observation, I don't currently have a Shimikaze, but my friend Carrier Zuikaku, he has one, and he's very good in them. And we noticed for a 2-man division, a Kebab and a Shimikaze together, working together, is pretty darn powerful. Only because the Shimikaze stays silent, acts as a spotter. I feel like the IJN destroyers are the best spotters in this game, only because they don't frequently go loud with their guns in order to deal most of their damage. They're inherently a silent class. Whereas,
let's touch on that for a second, right? So in that vein, did both of you guys rank out this season?
Yes, it did.
Yes. Yep.
All right. So I don't know if your experience was different than mine, because I kind of had the tail end because there's a break in the middle. So I had to really grind it out at the last 5 days to rank out. But
yeah, I'm right there with you.
There are a lot of people tried to say that and tried to prove that in ranked. And it's probably a matter of the quality of player I was with towards the end, as opposed to some of the ones early on. But if that were totally true, I think we would have seen more Japanese destroyer play and ranked that was successful, wouldn't you say?
I don't think ranked is a fair comparison, because you can't queue in with divisions.
Exactly.
The whole point of spotting is that you have someone who you're communicating to, who you're lighting the target up for. But in ranked, no one coordinates that way. It's just off to do your own thing.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, oftentimes there is a, hey, here's my team speak, hop in, and we'd hop into somebody's team speak on that team. So not entirely true, but I'd also argue that in ranked battles, people are more attuned to watching for that and waiting for that. And just a simple chat line at the beginning, hey, I'll spot and you fire kind of thing would usually suffice.
Yeah, I'll entertain the argument, because when you get to the higher ranks in the ranked battles, you typically see a bit more teamwork and coordination than you would just in a random public match. As for the effectiveness of the IGN destroyers and their spotting abilities, they do have the advantage there, but that's their only advantage. When it comes to contesting the cap points, they can't really put up a fight since their guns just can't compete. And as soon as their allies are sunk, then they're kind of stranded with their one trick that they have. So I did see a few decent Japanese destroyer players in ranked this season, and I will give kudos to them for playing them and putting up with the ranked meta as it was. But typically, when you load in and you see the matchmaker and the team setup, and you see a Japanese destroyer on your team, usually there's just an audible sigh from the entire team.
My eyes just roll out of my head.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. I would think that at least in random battles at high tier that I got it, you're in a shimmy, and maybe you played shimmy a long time ago, and maybe you like the 20k torpedoes, and maybe you're still rocking the 20k torpedoes, but at least get in front. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to contest with a gun DD, but at least give us a chance to do it. Because otherwise, I mean, you're just sitting there and it's the same thing you had before, which is now I'm in a battleship dodging torpedoes, trying to contest a cap. and my destroyers behind me.
I mean, that problem sort of applies to like all classes of ships, right? Like there are plenty of times where there's destroyers behind the battleships, but there are also plenty of times when the battleships are the ones who are, just hiding in the back and not, moving up and helping the team secure a cap. But it's more of a general player, psychology problem than it is, I think, a specific, Shimakaze DD problem.
I just want to throw this point out here, and it will probably derail the entire rank conversation. I don't want to get back into that again. But it comes down mostly to the game mode, domination versus standard. With domination, you have specific cap points in the middle of the map. Standard, you can create choke points and set up ambushes. It's just a different style. The domination's much more set up for the gunboats that can contest those caps. Standard, you get to play with the area denial that we touched on earlier, and those kind of long-range torpedo ambushes that you can take advantage of.
Well, has Bastion changed any of that for you?
Not that I've seen that. It's
Bastion.
domination with guns that shoot you.
Well, Bastion is pretty huge in the fact that as a American destroyer, if you get to one of those points immediately and cap it, the fort is your spotter. So all you do is smoke up, and you have that fort and surveillance station, and it spots all. If you cap it first, if you get there first, and the enemy DDs I guess took their time to get there, you can get there, smoke up, capture the fort, and you can catch them with their pants down. You end up seeing both a couple enemy destroyers from the surveillance station, and you can just light them up and destroy them with the fort's help. It's actually kind of interesting. I've seen single gunboat destroyers hold off like multiple large ships just with the fort's help.
Well, okay, so let's ask the question then. I mean, in their roles, do you the two destroyers are balanced?
Me personally, just looking back at ranked, Hatsuharu, but the difference between a Hatsuharu and a Blease is only 0.9 kilometers, less than 1 kilometer difference in concealment. And think of everything that Hatsuharu gives up just for that 0.9 kilometers. It's a lot. I mean, Blease can still. I mean, it's kind of like not just Blease, but American destroyers in general. The Shimakaze and the Gearing might actually have the same concealment. I think it might be exactly 5.9 or something like that.
It is.
It might be 0.1 different, right?
Yeah, it's very small.
Or maybe it's the Gearing that's 5.8. But I don't know. The Shimi and the Gearing, do you think they're balanced?
I would still go back to saying that the Gearing has the advantage over the Shimakaze. As for their own specific roles, I think it's pretty well balanced as is now. Yeah, they both have the opportunity to deal damage, carry the team, and excel in their own roles. But again, I'm given the choice, I would go Gearing over Shima.
I think they're different tools to do different jobs. And currently, with the current game modes available, I feel like the Gearing is like, I don't know, bringing a more general purpose tool, like a hammer or something. And I feel like the Shimakaze is some specialized, I don't know, laser level or something crazy. I'd rather always bring the hammer than have this specialized tool.
Hammer can solve any problem.
Well, I don't know if we caught it because we've had a little bit of trouble with the recording stuff tonight, Spectre. But you made a comment about, well, then why the preponderance and why the higher average damage? And I think this is kind of what I was gonna ask you to touch on again, which is, in general, Shimis do way more damage for your team in pug matches. Now, granted, it kind of comes down to something you said earlier, which was what's it to, right? I mean,
it's all target selection,
right? You do 89,000 average damage in a match. Probably it's against battleships mostly, right?
Very, very seldomly is it
so-
destroyers. Occasionally it's a cruiser, but it's mostly battleships.
Right, but then when you go back and you kind of compare win rates, right? And I just did yours individually, which probably isn't a good way to do it because there's a lot of variables in there. You can take the average and look at it. You can take the top 10 players and look at kind of their win rates and try to infer some things in there. And it's hard to parse out the hey, I did more damage to more important ships and got rid of them quicker, and equate that to I can carry harder in this ship and pull out more victories.
I think what you're saying is, I think we touched on it earlier, was dealing 30 to 40k damage, say, to a battleship is completely different than doing just 40k damage to only destroyers, because if you do that kind of damage to just destroyers on the enemy team, you've pretty much wiped out their entire destroyer force by yourself, which would be pretty badass. I don't know if anyone's actually done that. I mean, it's super rare.
In my carrier.
Pretty much.
Hey, now.
But
well, yeah, and that was the point you made, and I think any normal person would totally agree with that. I have trouble trying to find a way to parse out numbers that prove that to be true on a consistent basis. I think maybe it's either I can't do that every time because their destroyers aren't always dum-dums, or that it gets into a situation few times where you're able to carry that.
And that is there are two destroyers with two, very different missions. Like, if you're looking to win in a domination match, you're looking to cap. And if that's the case, the Gearing is your top pick, because the Gearing can fight on a cap and kick out other destroyers.
Yeah, but you don't know the map ahead of time.
No,
I don't
but
know that I'm going into domination.
There's only two modes.
If you look at the top players
in the game,
their win rates are equal, right? In the top tier destroyers,
I think.
On both sides.
Think even in that case, even if we take a look at just standard battles versus domination battles, I mean, if you're looking to win, you win by destroying the enemy's ships, and the Gearing is arguably better at picking off destroyers than a Shimakaze is at picking off battleships, right? Like a Shimakaze, they do tons of damage, but it generally is pretty spread out. As long as the battleships aren't brainless and sitting still or sailing in straight lines. You land a torpedo 2 on a battleship, they sail away for a while, but they're still in the fight. Whereas with the Gearing, you get into a lot of situations where you simply just outright kill the destroyer. If not by your own guns, then at least you spot for the team and your team finishes the job.
Let me pose it to you this way. The Gearing is more consistent. Shimakaze goes in cycles. In any kind of situation, any kind of matchup, the Gearing can perform. In a Shimakaze, if there's a decent carrier captain or a decent destroyer captain on the enemy team that is hounding a Shimakaze, that Shimakaze is essentially useless. Whereas the Gearing can still fight back.
Exactly. The Gearing could just, if he can't get into a good torpedo position, I've noticed at high tiers, I've noticed just a lot of enemies that are just running away the whole time. They don't care if they're getting triple capped out. There's just a bunch of battleships just sailing away from you. It is almost impossible to torpedo a target that is just straight up running from you. Whereas the Gearing and the Kebab, to an extent, have the option to just fall back to that 9.7 and just start shooting with the crazy DPM. I don't think the Shimakaze has that, so it loses out. The Gearing really just has versatility. I feel like the Gearing is to destroyers as the Japanese cruisers are to the cruiser line, like the Zhao. Just it has everything.
So for the lobby that says the Shimi needs fixed, do you think it needs fixed? And if so, what would make it more in line balance-wise?
In my mind, I would just reduce the torpedo detection range a little bit. With the introduction of vigilance and the detection module, you can spot those torpedoes far enough away that you have a full, I think it was 10 or 12 seconds to react. And that's enough time to where you can maneuver to only take one or even dodge the complete wave, even if the Shima does drop it at 8 or 10 kilometers.
Yeah,
are we talking about just the long-range torps, or are we talking about the 12-kilometer ones?
I'm talking about the 12-kilometer ones.
Also, it could be. I think the biggest thing was with the Shimakaze is maybe map design a little bit. So there's certain maps where the Shimakaze does okay, and then there's if the enemy doesn't have a need to go into a choke point, the I'm talking beyond my level because I don't have the Shimakaze, but just torpedoing in general. If the enemy doesn't have to go into a choke, torpedoes aren't very effective. It's hard to kill someone that doesn't want to come into a cap point with torpedoes. or not even a cap, but just come towards you.
Yeah, it's very difficult to kill something that's going away from you.
Exactly.
How many times, Zampy, in your Shimikaze, do you find yourself in a situation where you just can't get it done?
Are we talking like out of a certain number of games?
Yeah, just,
Average week.
how many times do you find yourself
An
where...
average week.
Yeah.
I would say if I play 10 games, maybe 2 or 3 of those I'm rather ineffective.
And so then the other games are just really huge?
Well, my average damage is pretty accurate. I'll have games where I get 20 or 30,000 damage because I only hit 1 torpedo and maybe a couple gun hits. And then I'll have a game where I'm getting 225,000 damage because there's nothing countering me. There's no plane spotting me or my torpedoes. There's only 1 or 2 enemy destroyers, and they're on the other side of the map.
All right, Taylor, here's another $1 million question for you. All things being equal, you've got everything available. You versus a kebab on a cap. Who wins?
The gearing will not win a kebab 1-on-1, giving both equal skilled and both max rank captains. But the gearing with a second person, maybe farther back, a cruiser 5-6 kilometers, or a buddy, can beat the kebab. Because the gearing could halt, smoke up for at least a moment, get some damage in, start moving out. Because, the kebab torps are probably right behind. Because he's probably going to torp into your smoke. And then that's enough to give you a little bit of an edge. But I've had moments where I've come up on a kebab, point blank range. We both hit each other 40-ish times. Looked at my damage. He did 23k damage to my gearing, and I only did about half of that to him. So I think we're always debating on whether to use AP or HE. People are always just saying stick with the HE, but the kebab is very resistant. It has very good armor. It's very resistant to taking damage unless you hit it in the right spots.
Was he shooting HE against you or AP at the time?
8 HE. Dude,
It's all right.
Zampy's a monster at this game.
We discovered that the kebab is better than both while you were away.
Kebab really... all right, you just turn your podcast off. Get the kebab.
Well, yeah, that's why we're not even talking about it. I mean, I think that's
balance.
pretty obvious, right?
Frankly, I think a lot of people would agree with the idea that the kebab, like Russian DDs, aren't really even DDs. They're just like light cruisers, small,
like
nimble,
small
light
zows.
cruisers.
Yeah. But yeah, so where'd we kind of left off with the kebab owns you 10 out of 10 times, all things being equal, right?
1-on-1.
Yeah, 1-on-1, obviously.
What you do against the kebab as a gearing is you don't fight fair. You just shadow him the whole time. Everywhere he goes, you stick right near him. And you hope your cruiser buddy has got good enough aim to at least peel off some of his health to where you can then engage and make it a clean kill.
All right, so you got 2 choices, right? You can shadow him and work for that position for 5 minutes, or you can break off and go do other things in the team. What do you do? He's an equal player to you.
If he's heading away from a cap point, all you have to do is spot him, make him leave the cap area. Hopefully that you spotting is enough to cause him to turn around and leave your little area, and then you win. If you were in the cap and you scared him, I mean, if him being spotted was enough to make him turn around, then that's a win in your book as a U.S. destroyer. You always want to be objectively minded. Like, you don't want to just go. One thing that we joke about is the one random DD that goes chases the carrier all game.
The lone wolf.
Yeah, true story. So on a little different tangent, and we haven't really touched on it, but how much has radar truly impacted your ability or top tier destroyer players' ability to affect the game? Other than it's just one more thing to kind of watch out for, and maybe you watch your range a little different. Does it really change what you do?
Go for it.
I would have said before they gave everybody situational awareness, it gave it a little bit more risk. You couldn't get quite up close to that 6 kilometer torpedo drop as you could previously. Now that everyone's situational awareness, even the cruisers that didn't take it before know they're spotted. And the sight range, at least on the Shimikaze, is only about 15 kilometers. So if you're lighting a cruiser and there's nobody else around, they know that you're near, and they can wait and pop their radar if you're within that 10 or 11 kilometers distance and light you up. So I would imagine now it has a bit more of an impact than it did previously, just because it does give them a little bit of a warning that you're in the area.
Power of situational awareness.
I would say I wonder if they're experimenting with the different radars, but in my mind as a destroyer player, I am more afraid of Russian radar than I am of American radar. Because I think the Americans last longer, but is much shorter range. The range is probably the scariest aspect. Plus, the Russians have the flat enough arc to actually make good on its radar. Whereas,
yeah, it's over 11K. It's over 11K. It's like 11.
And there's probably 2 American cruisers in this game right now that actually can capitalize on radar, and that is probably the Des Moines and the Atlanta, because they have the damage output to just within their radar duration to absolutely destroy you if you're close enough, right? That's the biggest thing, because it got the somewhat floaty arcs. The Des Moines not so bad as the Atlanta, but the Atlanta gets a little closer, so there's that. But I mean, whenever I see a radar cruiser, me personally as a gearing or a gunboat, I'll just go to that 9.7, 10 kilometers, and I hopefully have the say in my Fletcher gearing, if I get the range module to 12.9, it just stealth fire them. You know, that's all you can do. And they'll pop their radar, and they might see you for a moment, but you just set them on fire and be safe.
As a Shima,
I know Whiskey's in here, so sorry.
I was
go
going
on.
to say that.
We'll get to him in a second.
So just with the Shima, with radar, I don't get any closer than 8.5 kilometers. If they light it up, they'll see me, but that gives me enough time to get out before I can be completely decimated. I'll take some hits, I'll take some damage, but that's why I run Survivability Expert on it. So,
for you, Taylor, in a gearing, how often or how much do you use AP?
Lately, if I've been seeing if I'm in offensive smoke and I see a battleship sub 10 kilometers broadside, my God, the AP numbers that I can put out with that ship almost rivals that of the Kebab. We'll see what happens with the normalization changes if they go through on the PTS, but that's all rumor anyway. But I've generally seen 4,000 average salvos for the AP with the gearing, which is 4,000 every 2.6 seconds, maybe down to 2.3 if you have it spec that way. That's impressive. That's a scary. I mean, you just see that battleships just start hemorrhaging health.
Okay, fair enough. I'll take that.
I mean, even starting at Benson's and Mahan's, like if you have you've got a broadside battleship, USDD AP is very, very powerful. It's a lot of people don't give it the respect it deserves, but I know at least this season when I was playing ranked in my Sims and my Mahan, if you smoke up next to like an enemy battleship, broadside to you, like 2 or 3 4K salvos are very common.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I never really considered doing that on my Fletcher, and so I think you guys have convinced me to give it a shot. So I don't know. Well, I'll check it out. But Whiskey was a big advocate for it the other day, and I thought he was full of crap, but apparently he's not. So I'll take his word for it.
You have to aim a little higher. You definitely don't aim for the waterline. It's either superstructure or like just at like the deck armor, I think, and then you get like these crazy numbers. I've seen it on the Kebab. The Kebab is one of those ships where like I see people, there's a movement to run all 3 tier 4 perks on it, and I was like, I'd still rather just a demo expert on the Kebab feels weird because the Kebab I feel like has the most usable AP of any of the destroyers. It gets crazy penetration. But anyway, back on topic.
Oh no, that is on topic. But one more thing I'd kind of like to get your take on is we had Sean Zizao and Zukaku on a few episodes ago talking carriers. And so I'd like to get your take as a top tier destroyer player. If you see one of them on the other team, what do you do as a destroyer? Does it change your gameplay at all?
If I see a carrier?
If you see a top carrier, because I think it differs on if you see a carrier that you don't recognize, or maybe which carrier versus you see one of those top carrier players. I would assume.
I treat them all equally until I see them how they behave in the match. I treat them with caution. I try to stay close to some ships with AA, not go out on my own where I'm going to get spotted by a plane and annihilated. So it's definitely a lot more conservative, a lot more reserved play, and those are typically the 2 or 3 games out of 10 where I'm not very effective, just because I'm completely counted.
I mean, is your worry that they're going to torp kill you, or is your worry that they're just going to spot you for somebody else to kill you?
They're going to spot me. I may not necessarily die, but I'm not going to be able to hurt anything.
How about you, Taylor?
I mean, that brings up a good point. If there's a good carrier, chances are he's going to keep his planes in front of the battleships. Planes can almost fully negate torpedoes. Like, they can spot them extremely early and just render them almost inert, and having guns really nice to have. But that's one thing we probably didn't talk about yet, is that at tier 9 and 10, Fletcher and Gearing can run defensive fire without really any downsides. They don't give up a gun turret anymore, not like the old Benson B versus the Benson C, which, by the way, in competitive play, the Benson C was really strong. If you can ensure that there's a carrier on the other team, having defensive fire as an American destroyer is pretty huge. But
So neither of you are worried about when somebody like Sean says, if a destroyer is not near high-end cruiser AA, I'm going to kill him every time. Neither of you have that concern?
in an American destroyer, I would say no. If I was in a Russian destroyer, I'd be concerned.
That's so funny, because they said the exact opposite. They're like, American destroyer, I'll just wait out your defensive fire and then I'm going to kill you. Russian destroyer, if he's smart because of his speed, it might be a little tougher, but that's an interesting perspective.
It's true, the Russian destroyer can outrun torpedo-dropped, or aircraft-dropped torpedoes with its just 48 knot speed. But
the Shimi just got to stay hidden. Once
yeah,
it's over.
The Shimi is probably the most affected destroyer by carrier. The Russian destroyer doesn't care that it's spotted. It's more like, you can see me, but good luck trying to hit me type of deal.
How about you, Spectre? Trying to hit either of those destroyers?
I'm a really bad carrier player, so no matter who I try to drop on, like it's really bad. But I will say, yeah, Shimi definitely probably the easiest target of all to try to go after.
Just because it's slower?
It's not necessarily slower, but it's just like, they don't have defensive fire and they don't have the speed. So just amongst like all destroyers, like they're like slightly easier to hit.
And the smoke doesn't last as long, so you're not going to play the chicken game to who flinches first.
Funny thing about that is I find that, like, generally speaking, like 9 times out of 10, as long as you can spot the DD right before he sort of coasts to a stop and you can drop torpedoes like right on top of him, you can usually scare the DDs out of the smoke, just flush them out, and then you just finish the job after they come out. Sometimes, if you're really lucky or if they're really bad, they just die to it.
So do you guys bother stopping in your smoke when a carrier is targeting you, or do you just keep moving?
I bait them. I can usually keep track of when they're going to drop, and then I'll evade them and make them waste their drop.
Yeah, I've evaded some torpedo drops, but I've also taken torpedo drops too. Generally, though, with survivability expert, you can take a couple, and it's okay. I mean, to outright be destroyed with the defensive fire, I mean, they scatter the planes, but I mean, as you're right, you can bait out the defensive fire. It's really interesting, because I know there are carriers out there. The thing is, though, if you know there's a good like Unicum carrier on the enemy team and your carrier is not a match for him, that's like one of the times in American Destroyer where you just like say, I'm going to stay within 5K in front of my battleships and cruisers. I'm just going to not overextend.
All right, fair enough. So I guess in the end, what we've come down to is that it is true, despite my beliefs, that the gearing is better, totally better, despite the numbers, than the Shimi, and that the one fix Zampy kind of feels for the Shimi that would put it back on par, despite the damage disparity, would be give it back its original torpedo detection range, and then in the end, the Russians rule all.
I think we all agree on that.
I wouldn't say rule all, right? Like Trash Can versus Benson. It's really that. Oh, if you want to talk about the difference,
that doesn't count. That doesn't count.
I say I mean, look at the disparity between the Fletcher and the Kagero. I mean, wow. It's almost like why. I mean, I don't play IGN Destroyer, but man, I'm like, why does the Kagero even exist compared to the Fletcher?
Shimmy. Pennants
exactly.
to the shimmy. It's like the Baltimore, right? Why does that exist?
The Baltimore.
Pennants to the Des Moines.
There has to be one in the line. Every line.
Well, I mean, there's
every
the
line gets a trash can.
New Orleans, Baltimore. I mean, where's it stop? But yeah, I mean, once you get to the Benson and the U.S. Destroyer line, even the Mahan to an extent, it's pretty much smooth sailing from there for those. But for the Japanese one, I kind of started up it, and I don't think I'll ever go back to it unless I'm really bored.
I'll say again, though, there's few things more satisfying than getting 6 torpedo hits on a battleship and seeing it go down.
I will say this. Sometimes you got to ride the meta, and when these German battleships come out, it might be a very good time to start doing Japanese destroyers.
You think it's going to be Tirpitz-Apocalypse all over again?
Oh, man, I imagine. There's going to be people that aren't even used to playing battleships.
But why? Because we'll have a top gearing player protecting us, right?
Maybe.
Maybe. You're going to jump ship?
He's going to be in his
briefly?
Shima, too.
Yeah, all right.
I, for one, plan on eating up German battleships in my carriers.
Oh, man.
That's going to be a lot of fun.
Curious to see how their AA stacks up next to American battleships.
Yeah.
No, it's not even going to be close.
Oh, come on. The Grosser Kurfürst? That thing's not going to be able to dodge any torpedo.
Yeah, that
oh,
thing's
yeah,
huge.
It's longer than the Yamato by a significant amount.
Size of a small island.
Yeah, if you don't have a pocket cruiser, it's going to be pretty rough against a top carrier player.
Yeah, dude. You better have a Des Moines just sitting next to you at all times.
Yeah, true story. All right, well, I think you guys dispelled a few things for me and kind of confirmed some others. Unless you got anything else, Spectre.
Well, actually, yeah. Before we do go, let's dispense some helpful consumer advice with regards to premium destroyers. Specifically, I think it's the Anshan, the Loyang, and the Bliskovitsa. As destroyer players, break down those destroyers for us. Like this last season ranked, like I went in with the assumption that I'm gonna get my Bliskovitsa and I'm just gonna kill everything because it's like the best DD. But
Mahan, man.
But after having played it for a while, like I realized its turning radius is pretty god awful. And I just found myself just getting picked off a lot just because I couldn't make the turns necessary to dodge the shells that, say a USDD could make. So sometimes I wonder about that.
Well, the Sims, I've heard this argument. I mean, the Bleece is very good because of the flatter arcs. It can kill destroyers at mid-range, which sometimes, because of its 42 knot speed, it can pull away after initially engaging at close range with a U.S. destroyer. Plus, its concealment is pretty much very close. It has some Russian properties to it. But the Bleece is like one of those destroyers where it's decent at pretty much everything. It can stealth torp. Its torps go decently fast and hit decently hard. Its guns, it has 7 guns, 8% fire chance. Probably its only weakness, as you said, is its turret traverse time and its ship turning. But I mean, vigilance is pretty darn important on the Bleece. But I feel like the Bleece is definitely, if you're into a premium, if you want a premium destroyer, in my mind, it's either the Bleece or or probably the Sims, right? If you want to train American captains.
Do you guys own all of those or any of those?
I only have Bleece.
I have Bleece, Sims, and Loyang. The Loyang is also, I would recommend the Loyang probably over the Anshan, just because unless they make like the Loyang has the potential to do well in a ranked setting as well. That hydroacoustic search is pretty powerful if used correctly. You can beat Gearings and Fletchers if you catch them in the right way.
Okay, all right.
The Anshan is pretty much a tier 6 Bleece, from what I understand. I'm looking at how it probably plays as a gunboat. It has similar stealth fire ranges. I think the Bleece can...
There's based on the stats, I believe, it's basically an up-tiered Grimiyashi, which was the special, beta Axis ship that they're no longer going to sell because it's too overpowered. What a surprise! That it's Russian. So, so in that regard, like, it's got to be a pretty solid ship.
It is averaging for tier 6. It's pretty close. I mean, the Anshan has got 54% win rate in the last 2 weeks, so it's definitely out.
Good.
It's definitely the top tier 6 DD. But I mean, I think it's just because maybe it's a premium. It has a certain type of players being kept out of the main tech tree. I don't really know.
Maybe.
No, I was considering getting the Lo Yang, but I don't know. I got a Benson. I love the Benson. It works just fine for me. I like the extra gun. It's kind of expensive. But
I played the Lo Yang a lot. I think I actually on that Warships today, it's saying I might be top on it in the end. I don't know.
We'll have to go. We'll have to go to the tape. No, that's good. It'd be awesome.
We're still recording shit.
Yeah, we have been. Although every time Spectre speaks, it I don't know, the U.S. government takes exception to it or something and starts hacking his shit. I don't know.
Goddamn CIA.
Because
you get off my balls.
I don't know what it is, but every time you talk, it just starts wrecking shit. Too bad your carrier play doesn't do that.
Ooh, shots fired.
What an ass.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah, my Lo Yang is almost right there with my Gearing's damage, which is kind of sad because I think I mostly played the Gearing when I was brand new to the game because it was my first ship line. I was like, yes, I will do American destroyers first. But anyway, I'm sorry, that's way off topic.
Well, I mean, that's
There's
to be
no such
expected,
thing.
right?
There's no such thing.
On a quick side note, like, that's to be expected, right? Like, if your first ship line, the ships in your first ship line, like, pretty much ought to bear the scars of you learning how to play the game, right? Like,
Exactly.
that's the case with my Iowa. Like, my Iowa is saddled with a lot of baggage from my days of being a terrible scrub.
Don't pick U.S. cruisers as your first ship line. That was a
Well,
horrible mistake.
Well, actually now probably not, but with up to tier 6, I mean, I would say the Cleveland, it used to be, but I don't know how it is now with the whole captain changes with the AFT and expert marksman and BFT. I definitely stopped playing my Marblehead after that change. I felt like the Omaha class just went to hell in a handbasket after that basically nerfed to light cruisers.
Well, that was
I heard
all
the Mogami did too.
It was all pre better AP pen on the Pensacola and New Orleans at the time too. So
Yeah.
So you didn't have those guns and all the other drawbacks, and then your reward is the Baltimore, and it was just like, oh god, I want to quit.
Yeah, dude, I actually free XP. I saved a huge amount of my free XP just to help with that red grind.
It's funny. A lot of people like have really terrible experiences with the Baltimore, but actually my experience with the Baltimore have actually been rather pleasant. I don't know what it is, but whenever I play the Baltimore, it's one of two things. Either I die immediately right off the bat, or I survive virtually all game and I do amazing.
I forgot to ask you, Zampy, do you have a Gearing?
I do not. I'm on the Fletcher.
Oh, that's that you're done then.
Yeah, you are done. I mean,
That's the,
I hear that one's like,
cap-
should
That's
be
the
the
dream.
tier 10, right?
Yeah, that's the fucking apex right there.
You guys just invalidated my entire argument for the past hour and a half. But whatever.
Well, no, we're just saying that we were talking Gearing versus Shimi, but really what we meant is the Fletcher is better than the Gearing, so just, switch the two, right?
All right, yeah. So,
In the
so
tech
by
tree?
commutative properties, Fletch is better than Shema.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the Gearing gives up some things for that one extra gun and that little bit more torpedo range. Certainly doesn't gain torpedo reload, doesn't gain torpedo damage, doesn't gain maneuverability, doesn't gain concealment. It loses gun range.
Yeah.
I mean,
The Fletcher's got
like
better guns. 90-second reload with some hard-hitting torps at 10.5K is pretty legitimate.
It can get down to 81-second reload on those 10 torpedoes. That's crazy.
Yeah, if you take the one talent, the one captain
if you
skill.
go crazy, if you go full, but I'd usually go gun fire rate on the Fletcher. Oh,
Yeah.
the Gearing's turrets turn a little slower than the Fletcher's as well.
Yeah,
Just
so
a little bit,
It's,
few
it's
seconds.
hard. It's hard to justify that the Gearing's better outside of the range, or unless you get the jump, because even the fire rate's almost comparable, minus one gun, right?
Right. Well, with new radar, having 11.1 maximum gun range, if that's the way you went, that's pretty rough. The reason you even use your guns is because, hey, I can't get close right now. I gotta be careful, or I'm knife fighting a destroyer on a cap point. Those are pretty much the way I see it. The only two situations you really need guns on a destroyer is if you're knife fighting a destroyer, or you can't get super close and you got to go stealth fire.
Yeah, so you basically talked me out. I've researched the gearing and I've been sitting on it and I haven't bought it yet. But you convinced me not to buy it just now.
I have a level 18 captain on the Fletcher and level 18 on the gearing. Just so I feel like, I mean, technically on my stats, I do more damage on the gearing, but also the gearing is still carrying the burdens of my new playerness. So like my Fletcher win rates and stuff is way higher than my gearing because I ended up going back to the Fletcher and just playing the crap out of it because I felt like it just felt better. It feels like almost like the Sims in maneuverability. Turn circle, all that. I think what is the turn circle? It's like almost like 60 meters or 80 meters less.
It's like 640. It's bigger on the gearing, but it's much larger. So Zampy, I got a question for you. So you got the Fletcher, so it's close enough, right? Which one do you enjoy playing more? Despite all the other stuff, do you prefer the Shimi or do you prefer the US style?
It really just depends on how my day at work went. What mood I'm in.
And what battleship players are out there? Is that
if I feel like annoying somebody by pestering them with 127mm shells, yeah, I'll go with USNDs all the time. If I feel like having a little bit of a relaxed match, get those nice, big, satisfying hits in, I'll go with the Shima.
Oh, that's another thing is too. You really do have to. You have to work to do good work with the American guns. It's probably one thing we haven't really touched on, but the arcs on the those higher tier American destroyers.
It's like the one thing that really puts me off of U.S. destroyers. Just trying to shoot anything past 7 kilometers is a huge chore.
No, you got to zoom out once on the standard reticle and put it at like 15, and then by the time you fire the 4th or 5th salvo, the first one's landing. As long as they don't turn, you're good, right?
Yeah, if they don't turn.
Exactly. You don't get good feedback on the guns. That's why I feel like if you wanted a pure gunboat, if you just like wanted the gun on destroyers, there's no reason not to do Russian destroyers. It's the thing is like the U.S. destroyers has elements of both the Russian DDs and the Japanese DDs. It's like they're the middle grounds versatility option.
I don't know. Like so, you said in a gearing versus kebab, it's no question. But I've always found Fletcher versus Udaloy, you'll beat a Udaloy. Have you found that to be your experience?
I mean, it's not nearly as overwhelming as an advantage, right? The kebab versus the Udaloy is what 8 guns versus 6. One of them might get knocked out versus a Fletcher's 5 guns versus 6. So only 1 gun difference versus 2. The fire rate is not that much. Like, let's just say the fire rate's not that much difference, but the kebab feels a lot more protected than maybe the Udaloy. The kebab's pretty sturdy. Not sure this.
I'm not afraid of a Udaloy and a Fletcher like I am of a cab, but alrighty. Well, unless anybody else has got anything earth shattering, I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. Anybody got any last notes or contributions?
No, just want to thank you for inviting me back. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully you have more conversation in the future that I can provide some input on.
Yeah, if you'd stay off the top of the leaderboards, we'd stop harassing you.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, there he is. Top year 6 of all time. That's impressive, dude.
Yep, top Shimi player. You know, he does his thing, right?
Man,
Fall a couple of things.
All right, gents. Well, I appreciate everyone's time and especially your patience today with all of Spectre's cyber hacking. And
get wrecked, scrub.
Yeah, it is. That's a true statement. For the first time in your life, you're wrecking me. But
bitch, please.
All right. But thanks, guys, and we'll catch up with you later.
No problem.